Start it up. Welcome back to the MBH podcast, Money Buys Happiness. It's a little bit of a different episode today outside of what we generally do, but we're super, super excited to be here. I have an amazing guest, Roman Baber. Welcome on.
Good to be with you.
We usually started off by kind of getting a background on our guest, who they are, what they do. A lot of people watching this will probably know, but it'd be great to fill in any listeners or viewers.
Sure. My name is Roman Baber, and I'm the independent member of Provincial Parliament from York Centre, which is the west side of North York. Up until January 15, I was a PC, a Conservative member of government, Doug Ford's government. I wrote a letter to the Premier, a public letter on January 15th, opposing the lockdown, after which I was removed from the Conservative caucus. And I now sit as an independent, but continued to advocate against the lockdowns and hope that I really change the conversation. I'm an immigrant in Canada.
Yeah.
I was born in the Soviet Union. When I was 8, we moved to Israel.
Wow, okay.
When I was 15, we moved to Canada. I moved straight to Shepherd and Bathurst, the
Nice.
district that I represent. And I like to call myself Exhibit A for Canadian opportunity. I've been very, very blessed, and I love this country very much. And I'm honored to represent the people of North York.
Yeah, no, it's an honor to have you. And I mean, you kind of got going there. But what I wanted to do was, before we get to the letter, because I think
Sure.
that's kind of the big point and what a lot of people want to know more about, and that whole situation. What were your thoughts when this whole pandemic first started? You know, how did you think it should be handled? You know, just a general overlook on, where you stood when this kind of all began, and maybe give me a little rundown of the days leading up to your decision to write that letter and kind of what happened post.
Sure. So, like I think most Canadians and most people around the world, when this thing first started in March and April, we didn't know what to think. We were honestly scared. But it's important to point out that now, looking back almost a year later, this is it's a real virus and it's a dangerous virus to certain folks. But a year later, thankfully, we understand that it's not what we thought it was. It's certainly not the World War III I thought it was in March and April of last year. So towards May, I started noticing that specifically the folks that are typically affected by this are over 80. In fact, over 80% of people that died are over the age of 80. And more than 80% of them died in congregate home settings, in group homes,
Yeah.
long-term care homes.
Yeah.
And every life is precious, so we shouldn't underestimate that life. But what that tells us is we need to focus protection on group homes instead of locking down healthy people.
Yeah.
And what seems now is to be making them sick. So towards May, I started saying, well, look, also the metrics are different. Not only do we know who's dying from this, we know that COVID is now so common, it's so prevalent,
Yeah.
that in fact, that's a good thing, because that makes all the metrics that we're worried about a lot better. It means that mortality is a lot lower. It means that hospitalization is a lot lower. And it's okay to have good news about COVID. It's like we've never had any good news. There's a lot to be happy about in
Yeah.
comparison to what we thought it was.
Fair. And so when you kind of took that all in, I guess, was it a decision that you made with a team, or was it kind of a decision you made personally to say, you know what, like, I think it's time to kind of speak out against what's being said, right? Because I think, from the outside looking in, from a regular civilian or citizen, when you're looking at the news, as you said, it's just really, it just feels like there's a lot of fear in what they tell you, and there's never really any good news on it, right? So what kind of made you say, you know what, it's time for me to speak up, like I'm going to write this letter, and kind of walk me through that process? Because I know it was kind of a big step for you, and obviously led to some, some repercussions, I guess you could say.
For sure. So, I would say from late spring, I started seeing that the repercussions of the lockdown are very, very serious. And in fact, my letter was not specifically about the economy or small business or jobs. It was mostly about health and mental health.
Correct.
And from early fall, I started hearing a lot of horror stories that involved the lockdown. Specifically, I've started hearing of a lot of attempted suicides.
Yeah.
I started hearing of overdoses.
Mm-hmm.
I had a good friend from the past who reached out who hasn't touched a serious drug in 15 years, and he said, Roman, I relapsed.
Yeah.
In the weeks leading to my letter, there's a remarkable number of circumstances. I had a good constituent who asked me to deliver a letter to Minister MacLeod saying an employee of his, a mom of 5, tried to commit suicide.
Wow.
Thankfully, she survived. I had another constituent who, on the Monday before the Friday of my letter, reached out and said, my mom had heart surgery scheduled for today, and it was canceled on the day of because the hospital can't guarantee a bed. And this is despite the fact that I know that the hospital has a bed.
Correct.
We're just rationing healthcare. And she had a valve replacement surgery in her heart and was canceled.
Wow.
And I think the main motivator was what is happening to our children. I spoke to so many constituents who said, I don't recognize my child.
Yeah.
My child is depressed, or my child is not eating or overeating or anxious, doesn't leave the room, or I'm estranged from my child. One of the saddest things we've done through this is we scare children so badly. We now convince children that if they hang out next to another child, someone might die. And that is completely unfair, and it needs to stop. We are raising a generation of children that will be afraid of normal life. And I got to the point where I was basically fed up.
Yeah.
And I did not see the government turning course either. That's the thing. I try to work internally. I would say since May.
Really?
I try to work internally and turn the government on this.
Yeah.
But unfortunately without success. And towards mid-January, I decided the government is not folding. Mm-hmm. And all I wanted to do, all that was going through my head is I wanted to start a conversation, because there was no conversation. Yeah. Right? People are afraid to say the very most basic things like, my child is depressed.
Yeah.
But we should not be afraid to say that, irrespective of what the context is. Correct. So I wanted to blow the lid off this thing for people to actually start speaking, and that's what thankfully happened.
So, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's true. You're right. And I know I kind of went through the letter, and I know you mentioned a lot of statistics about that. The suicide rate's gone up, drug abuse, domestic violence, all of that has risen, right? And I noticed there was actually some stuff that you put in there about the amount of deaths total in our province, and very small amount of them coming from outside of long-term care homes. Yeah. And when those were compared side by side with the suicide deaths, alcohol abuse and whatnot, that was kind of as a turning factor for you to say, okay, there's something not right here, right? Or maybe it's not being handled the best. So you go ahead, you write this letter. I think I had read that it was maybe 3 hours you had heard back. Walk me through that if you can, kind of like, how were you notified that you were removed from the party? How has that affected you being independent now, right? Because you're still in your role, but what does that kind of look like for you now? And I guess, yeah, a lot of people who have reached out, they want to know what that looked like. Because from the outside, it was kind of just a news headline, it popped up and it was gone. Like, you know what I mean? Within minutes. So walk us through that, please.
So I think news broke generally in the morning.
Yeah.
And media started calling at 7 o'clock in the morning. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, I learned by a text message from the chief of staff that
wow,
I was removed.
Wow,
but
like
I had News Talk 1010 starting 15 minutes later, and I think it was one of the first main interviews of the day. And with all the adrenaline of what was transpiring, I didn't even think about my ouster. I thought about that I'm probably going to have 2 to 3 days where I can make a significant difference in talking to people and encouraging people to speak. And that's exactly what happened. I had a lot of good conversations, and I would say fairly quickly, the tone started to change.
Yeah.
People started talking about how the lockdown actually affects them. It's a hashtag that I started on Twitter. Call it My Lockdown Story.
Yep.
Where people describe some of the things that are happening to them. One of my best friends, she had a grandma in North York General Hospital. She says, I can't see grandma. She's confused. She doesn't understand why I'm not coming. Yeah. We hear repeatedly of missed cancer diagnosis. This is the worst thing that's happening. Yep. Because screenings are significantly down. People losing their lives and losing their livelihoods completely, and it doesn't just affect the owner of the business. It affects their family. It affects all of their employees and their families, and all of their suppliers and their families. So the effect is devastating. And so I wanted to get the conversation started, and the conversation changed. And over the following couple of weeks, the media started writing about the shadow pandemics, whether it's the effect on mental health. Yeah. But 70% of Canadians are experiencing mental health issues right now. Imagine what a shocking number that is.
Huge.
We have a shadow pandemic of eating disorders among young people. Mm-hmm. We have uh, overdoses, this is one of the, I can't tell you, in the city of Toronto alone, overdoses year over year from 2019 to 2020, they're up 67%.
It's wild.
It's wild. And these are real lives, real families. And because people are in isolation, they're depressed, they're hopeless, they're bored, they're trying to escape this reality. And that leads to catastrophe. So I'm glad we're talking about this.
No, and that's a very important point. And I feel like, again, from the outside kind of looking in, it's not talked about enough. That really hasn't hit the media enough. And I think that that's something that people are now starting to become frustrated with, because we're only seeing the one side of the pandemic, right? Why isn't the media talking about these things? And so I think that a lot of people now have lost trust in what they're seeing, right? On on the bigger news channels, let's say, or news or media outlets. So that's kind of a question that I wanted to ask and get your opinion on. How do you think they've handled it, the media as a whole? And I guess we can talk mainstream media because, on Instagram and whatnot, you have a great page. And I love what you're doing with it. You're speaking out, and a few other people, Randy Hillier, I'm sure he's out. He's doing the same thing. But the media, the mainstream media, how do you feel like they've handled this whole situation?
I wish early on the media took greater care to call attention to the toll of the pandemic. I also wish that the media would ask more questions about not just whether we're doing enough to save people from COVID or soon enough, but also, is what we're doing making sense? Only in the last couple of weeks, I started hearing the media questioning the health folks a little bit. I heard a reporter from the CBC that works in this building asking, well, the models that the command table puts out, they seem to be overly pessimistic all the time. And I wish that people would speak to that earlier. And I want to say something about that. Yeah. A lot of what we're doing is in response to this modeling. And people say, well, it's because we're locking down that we don't meet the model. And we say, no, we typically always meet the model by way of cases or by way of trajectory.
Correct.
We just don't meet the other metrics that we're worried about, like hospitalizations or ICU or death.
Yeah.
And that is very important for your listeners to understand. It's a point that I try to convey to people.
Yeah.
Cases are not proportional to the things that we're worried about.
Correct.
They're not proportional to hospitalizations or intensive care unit patients or deaths. It's not about how many people get COVID. It's about who gets COVID, right? If you and I got COVID, we'd probably be okay.
Yep.
If 100,000 guys like us got COVID, you wouldn't see the hospitals move. But if 100 seniors in long-term care get COVID, then God forbid, half of them might be gone.
Correct.
And so we need to, like, when you have an event, you got to have focused. You don't make the defensive perimeter too wide. Make it where you need to make it. And of course, consider the toll of the lockdown. But just to finish the point, I apologize, I'm being a little lengthy.
No, please.
Back to the media for a moment. I would say the media here has been subjected to the very same phenomena that all of us have, that doctors have, that politicians have, whereby we have this COVID dogma, this fear, this politically correct narrative that is fortified by cancel culture. That if you go against the politically correct narrative, you're going to be canceled.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think, and I think the media is subject to the same pressures, which should not be happening, because fair and unbiased and independent media, and that means media that is not afraid, is essential for democracy. So
100%. I absolutely agree with you. And that kind of leads me to my next point. I know that you mentioned various times that you feel like a lot of members agree with a lot of the things that you say or have said in the past, but haven't necessarily spoken out against it, or have spoken to, give their true thoughts on the whole situation. Maybe you can fill me in on why you think that is. I'm sure people have an idea, but if from the way that I see it, and I know a lot of people as well, is that if our politicians aren't speaking their truth to what they truly believe in, are they fit for the job? So maybe you can fill me in on that, because you have made that statement plenty of times that you feel like other MPs or members feel the same way, may have some of the same views as you. I think you actually even mentioned that you believe Doug does as well, Mr. Ford. So maybe you can speak on that a little bit.
Sure. I've been asked multiple times after my letter whether there are other members of provincial parliament that feel the way I do. And I said, yes, there are other MPPs that agree with me. And it's no secret. It's out there publicly in the media.
Yep.
So I don't need to go further. I have to respect my former colleagues, and I can't speak to that. I would say, however, that I believe that Doug Ford actually agrees with me quite more than he leads on to believe. I'm of the view that what is happening right now is simply political. We understand that the lockdown is deadlier than COVID generally. Mm-hmm. But if Doug Ford right now were to just lift the lockdown with like 1,200-1,300 cases a day and then potentially going up, then that would defeat the narrative that he was able to establish early on, where he looked like a hero, locking everyone down, coming down on cases. So now that he's been locking us down for no good reason, because we've been understanding the toll of COVID for a good 8 or 9 months now.
For sure.
So now that he's been locking us down, at least here in the city of Toronto and Peel, since October, people would say, well, why have you been keeping us out in lockdown since then? Look at how much carnage you've caused. So he's not in position right now to admit that he's wrong.
Correct.
And because of that, he continues to quadruple down, keep us in lockdown, and the cost is ruining additional millions of lives. It's astonishing and it's incredibly sad.
So what's the play? So if you're in his shoes, and if you can speak to that, what's the play? How do we exit lockdown? How do we move forward with COVID? Because it obviously seems like it's not something that's going to go anywhere. We're going to have to learn to live with it. At least that's kind of what the way that I see it, and I think a lot of people do. What's the play? What's the move?
So first of all, the move is leadership and honesty. Remember why you're here.
Yeah.
You're not here to be premier and to be reelected as premier. You're here to serve the people and to help people. That's why we're in this business. So first of all, you do right. The party campaigned on the slogan was for the people. This lockdown is not for the people. Yeah. So that's the first thing. Show leadership and say, I want to do what's best for folks. And what's best for folks right now, especially with long-term care homes mostly vaccinated, is to allow us to go back to a semblance of normal, which is the best thing we can do for our health. So my proposal was as follows. Number one, focus on where the problem is. If it's in long-term care, fix long-term care. Throw everything at it. Yeah. More staff, more money, better infection control. 11 months later, we still don't have that in place. Second of all, if you need additional hospital capacity, great, build it. We've actually added some capacity. We have a field hospital in Burlington. Yeah. It's empty. Okay? It's never been used. Yeah. So, but if we think that we need additional capacity, great, build it. Number three, be fair about the narrative. Stop scaring people. So these commercials we see on TV, it's needless because it's not true. Yeah. And so and as long as people keep fearing, and we still have a lot of folks that are healthy folks that are generally afraid, it's going to be very hard for us to get back to normal. So be fair about the narrative. Yeah. And finally, lift the lockdown. Yeah. And lift the lockdown means back to school, back to work. And we can discuss what that looks like, but continuing to lock people down is really, really bad for their health.
Agreed, 100%. And I think obviously that's why we're here, right? Another question I have, and maybe you can speak to this as well, is mask mandates. I know a lot of people, that seems to be a really, really a big thing. A lot of people are talking about. It seems to make the news a lot. The protests that are happening, which don't really make the news. They're calling them anti-maskers. What are your thoughts on the mask mandates? And I guess kind of the way that those have infiltrated everyday life, and what's your move on that?
So my view is, if we can show that masks actually help to stop the spread or slow the spread, if we can actually demonstrate significant what's called efficacy, that they do something good, then absolutely. I think that we need to, and I wear the mask and I will wear it. I will abide by the law of the land as well.
For sure.
But I think that we are owed a conversation about everything that happened.
Yeah.
We're owed a conversation about the lockdown. We're owed a conversation about physical distancing. We're owed and that includes also masks.
Okay.
Because we had a completely different science on the mask for more than 100 years.
Yeah.
We had cases as recent as 2015 and 2018 where labor arbitration tribunals concluded that they make no difference when nurses didn't want to wear them when they didn't vaccinate.
Yeah.
So I say, look, we will do it. We will do whatever is necessary. And I will encourage folks to wear the mask if it makes sense. But I also ask for a fair discussion, not to disparage people and call them names, but to just have a conversation.
Yep.
Something that we should be able to do, something that is so secondhand. We're immigrants in this country, right?
Yeah.
We come to this country because we're able to have a conversation.
Yeah. You know what? And I agree with that. And I think that that's something that, in society we're losing. You mentioned cancel culture earlier on when we were speaking about the media. And I think that's been a huge part of this pandemic is people being afraid to speak their truth, right? Speak about what they believe in. And I'm sure in a position that you're in, that feels sometimes harder to do. Although you did mention that at the end of the day, your job is to serve the people, right? So I kind of wanted to circle back a little bit. Kind of when you were released from the party, I want to speak a little bit more to that. What like the response that you got, and from what I can read online, it didn't seem like they came back with statistics or numbers, let's say, to counter what you wrote. Do you feel like they did a good job in responding? Maybe give me your thoughts on that.
They accused me of misinformation.
Yes, yeah.
And that was worse than being kicked out of caucus. I've been practicing law for 12 years before I was elected. I have appeared before every level of court in Ontario. I've submitted papers hundreds of times. No one has ever questioned my integrity or my credibility in the legal profession. And it was painful.
Yeah.
But I immediately came back on the day of.
Yep, same day.
Put out a sheet that said, this is where this information. Within 2 hours, we had a responding fact sheet. They couldn't respond.
Yeah.
On the Monday, Chief Medical Officer of Health, former Chief Medical Officer of Health, who actually helped train the current Medical Officer of Health, who was Chief Medical Officer of Health of the province of Ontario for 10 years, Dr. Shabas, came out, wrote a letter and said, Roman Baber was right on all 5 points.
Wow.
They caught onto a typo and they decided to make like a huge thing out of it.
Yeah.
But what's most important is they never actually addressed the main question I posed in my letter.
Yeah.
And no one to this day, and that's the thing about what I refer to are the COVID fearmongers.
Yeah.
Is that all they do is they disparage us or they call me names.
Yeah.
But they never actually answer the question, is it okay to factor in the toll of lockdown, the cost of the measures into the overall healthcare equation? And if it's okay, then what does that equation look like? Let's do that exercise. Nobody is able to respond to that. Yeah. And yeah.
No, absolutely. And when I kind of read through their response, I think they tried to catch you on. I was like, you said it, the number was 50%, and it was 38% something.
The number to date was 38%. The overdoses were 38%.
Yes.
But the article said it's trending 50%. So I said it's trending 50%.
Yeah.
And they said no, it's 38%. I said Ontario hospitals are at 81% capacity or something. I forget the exact number. And they said, no, that's not what it is. But they spoke about not Ontario, they spoke about the GTA.
Correct.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
They accused me of misspelling Margaret in the ward Princess Margaret Hospital.
Yeah.
And the reference that I made there was, I quoted Keith Stewart, the director of our cancer hospital, who said, we are in for a tsunami of cancer.
Yeah. Which is
because we're
crazy.
Not pre-screening. And instead of addressing the tsunami of cancer that the director of Princess Margaret Hospital is afraid of, they caught on to the only typo in my letter, which is where I spelled the word Margaret. Shame on them.
Yeah, no, agreed. If that's the only response you're going to give, I mean, it kind of speaks for itself, right?
Yeah.
We have a little more time left. I want to get into something really quickly. You put forth a motion to have all the MPs reduce their salaries down to what the CERB was, which was at the time was 2,000. That was unanimously declined, right? Thrown away. But that ended up kind of backfiring, I guess, if you want to put it in that term. And they kind of put forth something to have just your salary reduced.
Yeah.
Maybe walk me through that, because I think that is absolutely crazy.
Yes.
And I don't think enough people know about it.
Yeah. So I introduced a private member's bill to cut MPP pay to the level of the CERB until the emergency orders are over.
Correct.
Except for emergency orders that pertain to hospitals and long-term care. That can stay. Yep. So I said, but until everything else is in place, you also get the CERB. So the first reading passed, but to move forward with the bill right away, I needed unanimous consent. So they denied consent. And then the government House leader, conservative, under Doug Ford, brought a motion to reduce my pay only. And that motion passed.
And that passed, yeah. Oh my God.
So the motion was out of order. It was illegal because you can only do it by way of legislation.
Okay.
I introduced that bill because I actually think that if MPPs are so quick to shut everything down, shut everyone down. After this meeting, after this podcast, I'm going to meet the owner of the Irv Gastropub on Carlton, who wrote a letter to the premier saying, we cashed all our life savings. Our credit lines are maxed. Our credit cards are maxed. We're suffering from mental health issues. Our lives have... You don't understand what you're doing with your lockdowns. It's almost as if you don't care because you're still getting paid. So I want to say, look, if you're so quick to cut everyone's pay, let's see if you make the same decision when your pay is affected. And what do we see instead? Instead, they make a joke out of it. And they make a joke out of it. And that just suggested to me how tone deaf this government is with respect to how disassociated they are from the reality that we're experiencing out there. More than 400,000 Ontarians have yet to resume, imagine almost 500,000 people have yet to resume work since pre the pandemic, especially young people. And people are at their wits' end, and they go and they make a joke out of it. I'll leave that issue alone. But it was an important lesson for everyone to understand what people in this building, we're at Queen's Park right now, what people are actually thinking.
And 100%. And I think, playing off that, I think, what does that say about, I guess, the state of our government or who's in charge of it, when things like that are to be made a joke of, and not only that, I think even circling back to certain members, named or not, not being able to speak their truth. How should a citizen of Ontario or Canada feel about that, right? And what steps can we take as everyday people to make changes, to kind of try to rearrange and find ourselves in a situation where we feel like the government is actually looking out for our best interest?
Today's my best buddy's birthday.
Okay.
I just spoke to him an hour ago. He's just a normal guy. 3 kids, wife, challenges. And he said, Roman, can you just explain to me what's going on? I just don't understand. So we have so we have a couple of issues. Folks are really not understanding what's happening because they lost credibility in what they're being told. It's so sad. And second of all, especially judging by what we just described, which is the pay, and they're cutting my pay. And the lockdowns continuing, in spite of the fact that the evidence is clear that the lockdowns are a lot worse than the actual fear of COVID to the population at large. People don't understand why government is doing something that makes completely no sense, which is why people have all sorts of suggestions as to why this may be happening. I say, this is just happening because of politics. That's it. Politics and stupidity and cancel culture and political correctness. That's it. No grand scheme out there. Okay. So
I think you answered a lot of questions with that one.
Absolutely.
Sure everyone has that.
They're not smart enough. Okay. They're not smart enough. And also they can't no one can keep a secret.
Fair.
But I think that's what really happens. So there are too many careers, too many egos, too many re-elections, too many stakeholders that would not be able to retreat from where we are.
Fair.
So I sympathize with folks that don't understand what to think.
The
The main reason is what is happening is so out to lunch.
Yeah.
Is so bananas.
Feels like we're in a movie almost.
Yeah, that this is why people don't know what to think.
Yeah. Fair. Listen, I know you have to head out, and we want to wrap this up. We are the MBH podcast, Money Buys Happiness. When you hear that statement, we ask every guest, when you hear that statement, I won't ask you if it's a yes or no. We usually just ask, what do you think when you hear that statement? Money buys happiness.
I think it definitely helps. Okay. I come from extreme poverty. Mm-hmm. My first bed in this country was from the dumpster across the street.
Wow.
My first car was like a 1987 Honda Civic, which I bought for $900 with my telemarketing money. It had like a floor. It had a hole in the floor.
Yeah.
But that also propelled me to want to work and to want to succeed and to go to Raptor games.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at the same time, I've certainly seen, at least in my own family, that lack of money has always caused a certain degree of unhappiness.
For sure.
Be it the tension between my parents.
Yeah.
Right? Couples have tension all the time when there's lack of money. Or the inability of parents to spend enough time with their children.
Yeah.
Because they have to work more than one job or work all the time. Mm-hmm. So do I think that money helps life in general? Absolutely. Yeah. It doesn't mean that it assures happiness. I've been very, very blessed since I became a lawyer. I was a member, I was a partner in a small firm, and we've been very, very blessed. And I'm probably better off now than I was when I was much younger. Yeah. But I was happier when I was a poor 20-year-old or a poor teenager than so it's mixed. Yeah. But I want to say a couple of thoughts. Sure. This is not a PG rated show, right?
Go crazy. So, I've been holding it, and I'm usually the guy with swear words going crazy. So
don't worry.
So go nuts. I'm in the building.
I'm gonna. Someone told me once, Roman, don't say that, but I think I should say that, especially given where we're at now. You often wonder, what does the world run around? Mm-hmm. Like, what runs the world around? Yeah. And I got to tell you, in my 20s, I thought that it was like entertainment with, with the ladies. That's what I thought it was.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then in my 30s, it was money. Yeah. I thought that money started running the world around. And as I approached my 40s, and I'm now 40, before COVID, I thought there was love. That love between people, because you can have all sorts of love. You can have love towards your staff. You can have love towards your friends, and it's something that the world cannot do without, and it's something that pushes the needle remarkably on so many things. With COVID, there was, at least until recently, I started fearing that the thing that actually runs the world is fear. I was so scared. Yeah. Thank goodness we don't have that. So I'm now back to love.
Nice, amazing. It's glad
because
to hear.
It will give you optimism, but I can assure you that money definitely helps, but it doesn't guarantee. Yeah. I want to say one more thing about money.
Please.
We have this culture, and especially with COVID, where somehow people have to feel guilty about entrepreneurship, about being entrepreneurial, wanting to make money. Yeah. In fact, this is why we now started to deem some businesses non-essential. We would never think that. Yeah. And this is because, I think in part, in the last 25, 30 years, we started thinking about business as a bad thing. Businesses exploit people, businesses colonialize, businesses do all sorts of, they just pollute, or they steal, and that is not necessarily true.
100%.
Entrepreneurship, freedom to get up and determine your own destiny, if you're doing it within the realm of the law, it's part of freedom. Yeah. That's why we're here. And if you want to work hard, or you have ingenuity that makes the world better, then why not be rewarded for it? That's what drives the world around. Not government, not the people in this building. They'll figure out a way to ruin it. Yeah. Okay?
Yep.
So, and they would never be able, if we ran government the way that we run our own households, would be a lot better off and a lot more efficient. We don't.
Sure.
So we don't need to buy into this culture that wanting to earn a good living and wanting to succeed financially is a bad thing. We should encourage people to achieve their dreams.
100%. And I have one more question for you.
Sure.
What's next? What's next for Roman Baber? What's the next move? Will we see you moving up in the ranks? What should people expect?
Politics is a very unpredictable business.
Fair.
Right now, I'm an independent. Independents typically do not win elections. I'm not allowed to run for the Conservatives again. I have not made any decisions with respect to my political future. But what's next for me is what's next in the next hour, what will be next tomorrow, what will be next over the short term for sure, is I'm going to keep fighting every day to lift the lockdown. And lifting the lockdown doesn't just mean we're back in red or back in orange. I love life very much, which is why I did what I did, and I love people very much. They always think, oh, you don't care about grandma, you don't care. No, it's the opposite. It's because we love people that oppose lockdowns.
Yeah.
So I'm going to continue speaking against the catastrophe that the lockdowns are. I'm going to continue holding the Doug Ford government accountable, demanding that they stop with the politics and they allow people to go back to a semblance of normal. And until then, I have no other plans until that is over.
I think, as a citizen, that sounds great. I think that's we need more people like you, especially in politics, that are speaking the truth and fighting the good fight. So, listen, Roman, I appreciate your time. It was a pleasure having you on, and I know a lot of people are gonna love a lot of what you said. It's a lot of what people have been wanting to hear from someone in your position. So it was very refreshing to hear a lot of what you had to say. And again, appreciate your time. We'll hopefully be able to get you on another time and have Ernesto in here as well.
I appreciate it sincerely. Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks, man.